So welcome everyone to our Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts webinar on navigating out of school time SEL for COVID-19. We're really glad to see so many people here from all over the state in so many different important roles in out of school time and in school as well for this important conversation. I'm Jim Vetter. I'm the Executive Director of the Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts, and we really like to welcome you here today. We'd like to thank the sponsors of SEL4MA that are including a particular shout out to our gold partner, Responsive Classroom, which has done some just pioneering work around social emotional learning. Supports communities in Massachusetts, around the country, and really around the world. And also a thank you to one of our newest sponsors, Edgenuity, that has an online program for adolescents, SEL curriculum called Purpose Prep. And we'd like to thank also other sponsors, Panorama, Lions Quest, William James College, Get Psych Sports, as well as Second Step, Aperture Education, the Center for Supportive Schools, Open Circle, Get Real, and Think Give. And we at SEL4MA, we are the grassroots organization promoting effective social emotional learning in communities all across Massachusetts. And we do that by raising public awareness about what social emotional learning is and about its positive effects in out of school time and in school settings. We do that by advocating for policy that promotes effective social emotional learning. And we do that by linking people to each other and to best practice resources. And that's what we're about today. And we really appreciate the opportunity here to be working with one of our partner organizations, United Way of Mass Bay and Merrimack Valley. And I'd like to welcome Sarah Link from United Way.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jim, for that warm welcome. It's really been a treat working with you and the team. I also am wondering if you could narrate my to-do list every morning, because I think my days would feel more feasible if I had you calming me and turning me into every day. So thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Link. I'm the Vice President for Community Impact at United Way. And for those of you who hear me introduce myself all the time, I always love to say in my heart of hearts, I'm an after-school director. So it really warms my heart to be with my people today. We are humbled and shocked by the number of people really interested in this conversation. It really speaks true to the deep concern you have for our kids right now and the crisis that we're facing in our region, in our country, in our world. And I really appreciate the time you're taking this morning to connect and learn and share. For those of you who aren't familiar with United Way, we do our work in partnership with others. That means schools and out of school time programs. We are realizing more and more now than ever, the time is to lean on each other, to connect, to support each other, and to really show up for students and kids and families. And just the fact that you're here shows we all share that passion and commitment. So thank you for coming. We know, I'm preaching to the choir when I say the ultimate crisis is really with our kids right now and their social emotional needs not being met. I have a first grader and a fifth grader at home. I'm married to a high school teacher, and this is hard. It's hard day in and day out. And I know for everyone here who has kids at home, it's hard personally, and it makes you worry even more about the kids you're not seeing every day and doing everything that you can for the kids in your programs, in your classrooms, in your schools. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Jim and Kate, thank you for putting this together. It's been a real treat watching this come together. And to our four panelists who are Steadfast United Way partners, thank you for spending your time here. And we're really excited to hear you share a little bit about what you're doing. My last comment is just to introduce my colleague, Danielle Kim. As you can imagine, this is a good time to be focusing in on public policy as well. Danielle is our relatively new public policy director. She joined us on March 16th. So what a time to be joining an organization, and what a time in our country to really be working on public policy. So we're really excited to have her on the team, and I'll turn it over to you to say hello.
Thanks, Sarah. And I also want to extend some appreciation to Kate and Jim for pulling us all together on this Friday morning. Really no better way to kick us off for Memorial Day weekend. So I'm glad to see everyone here. So as Sarah mentioned, I've been working with United Way for just a few months now, but have been really diving in to track and monitor all of the policy proposals moving at the federal and state levels to help our families and our organizations weather this crisis. We know that this is a great time of uncertainty, and all of you are certainly holding down the fort to make sure that our families and residents have what they need to get through this crisis. Also, we know that Governor Baker announced his reopening plan earlier this week. And as many of you, we're still waiting for a lot of details and clarity on what this means for the out of school time field, what this means for social emotional learning, what this means for our young people's education and development moving forward. Hopefully we'll have more details soon, but certainly I wanted to pop on and introduce myself in case that you folks have any ideas or suggestions on how we can ensure that out of school time and social emotional learning is really centered in what the administration, our federal delegation, and our state officials are prioritizing this during this crisis. I really encourage you to reach out to me, and I'll include my contact info in the comment box here, so please do that. And I also just wanted to say that all of us know that out of school time matters now more than ever. Prior to this crisis, many of you were working on how to align what happens in school and out of school. And certainly now that bridge has been dissipated and everything is out of school time. And certainly social emotional learning is as important now more than ever. I mean, even just navigating our family members, our children, our coworkers requires a great deal of social emotional competencies to get through this. And so I'm grateful to all of you and the work that you're doing. So now I'll pass it over to Jim, who will get us into the meat or tofu of today's program.
Excellent. Thanks, Danielle. And yes, really wonderful to see so many people here on this day before a long weekend, sort of. I guess we're not really, most of us not are going to be heading off to any place for this long weekend. So it's really great to be here in what has been a really challenging time in the world. We've got with us some really wonderful panelists. And if you're coming here today to find the solution to how to provide social and emotional supports in out of school time in COVID-19, well, actually nobody has the solution. But what we're here today to do is really to share the kinds of things that everyone's been thinking about. We're here to share the kinds of practices that you all have been developing, both our panelists and actually all of you here. So we really encourage you throughout the webinar, go ahead and use the chat. You can ask questions of the panelists, you can share your own ideas. And actually I'd like to toss it off with a first question for folks in the chat. That what are some of the kinds of concerns that you've been having around the social and emotional well-being of the young people that you support in your work? So just take a moment and think about that in this COVID-19 situation, what are some of the kinds of things that you've been wondering about? And we will provide a recording of this, entire session today within about a week after the webinar, and we'll also share any other resources that we provide. So again, just take a moment and think about it. That when you're thinking about social and emotional supports, what are some of the kinds of things that you wonder about? As we're doing that, I'm just going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So I'll call on the panelists if you just give your name, your organization, and your role, and just a sentence about what your organization does. So Charlene, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlene Smart, and I am the Director of Enrichment at Sportsman's Tennis and Enrichment Center. And we are first a tennis center, second, and most important to most of us, is our Enrichment Center, where we provide out of school time services to families and children from K2 and beyond.
Great. Welcome, Charlotte. And Roman.
Here I go. My name is Roman. I am the executive director for our Old Colony YMCA Taunton branch. A little sentence about the Old Colony Y is that we are one of the leading childcare providers in Southeast Massachusetts. We have over 45 sites. So we see about 2,300 kids a day before the COVID-19 crisis took place. So a big thing we've been working on this year is social emotional learning and intertwining that through all of our programs. So I'm excited today to share what we've been working on.
Great. Thanks, Roman. And over to Alex.
Good morning. My name is Alexandra Oliver Davila, and I'm the Executive Director of Sociedad Latina. We are a youth development organization. We work citywide with youth from middle school to 2 years out of high school. And we focus on civic engagement, academic support, arts and culture, and workforce development and family engagement.
Wonderful. And Barb.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barb Colombo Adams, and I am the Director of Social and Emotional Learning for Kids Only After School on the North Shore of Massachusetts. Our agency has been around for 35 years and has actually always been intentional about inclusion and social emotional learning. We serve about 1,600 children a year prior to COVID, and ages 5 to 14, and in about 18 different programs in 5 communities on the North Shore, really focused on holistic learning and out of school time activities and supports.
Great. Thanks, Barb. So just thinking about that question for all of you. So I see that folks are talking about some of the kinds of concerns that they've been having, that folks are worried about kids being isolated and the feelings that might come with that. Folks are thinking about how to keep young people connected as a community at this time. And how do you keep them engaged in some things other than using screens? That folks are worried about some of the stresses that everybody's feeling in families and the young people are feeling, and about young people having to juggle so much, that including trying to juggle some of this end of the school year period, juggling school, maybe taking care of other kids in the family, that parents trying to work. So I'm wondering for each of you, what are some of the things that you've been thinking about or concerned about in terms of the young people that you work with in your programs? Charlene.
So for our program, we took a lot of time right in the beginning, just really trying to reach out to families and make sure that we were meeting their initial needs. Like everyone, we were worried about making sure, our kids were okay, our families were okay. And then quickly shifted into figuring out how we could stay in contact with our students and support them through what was a difficult time for everyone. Families were trying to figure out how they were going to be at home teaching their children. We have families who really couldn't connect with their kids' education. So, we were that bridge and trying to figure out how to do it all in a very, very short time. We quickly put together some things that worked and some things that really didn't work. Zoom is Zoom for everyone, and some kids, really gravitated to activities, and some didn't. And a lot we're still trying to figure out. I saw, I'm one of those freaky folks that has to have the chat up, and I saw someone, make a comment about what do you do about the kids that you haven't reached, that you're worried about. You know, how do you support your staff when they're worried about the kids that they haven't reached, as well as continuing on to do the work that you're doing? So we have provided weekly opportunities for our kids to get together with the staff and do lots of different things over Zoom, and it's ever evolving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think you make a good point that, you know, you trying a lot of different things. Some of them might have worked right away and some of them not so much. So it seems like a lot of out of school time programs are really innovating right now, are really experimenting with a lot because no one has been in this situation before. But so Alex, I'm wondering for you that what were some of the first kind of concerns that you folks had at Sociedad Latina, and how have you been thinking about it?
So I think similar to Charlene, we really focused on meeting basic family needs. So we work with families that are new immigrants, families that are undocumented. So we really wanted to make sure that there was a well-being check, and then also making sure that all of our young people had technology, that they had access, that families knew where they could access food, that we could connect them with different resources, whether that's some organizations that we're working with that are walking some of our families through unemployment, you know, in Spanish. And then we also we've been giving out direct cash assistance to families. So I worry, similar to what's in the chat box, many of our youth, their parents are either, you know, unemployed completely or frontline workers. There's people at home that are sick in their house. And you can imagine if you are not English proficient, if you are undocumented, how scary that is. Some of our youth are actually essential workers. They also have siblings. So I think the first piece that we really focused on, besides making sure that all young people had technology and access, was just the well-being. You can't really expect a young person to do any kind of learning if they don't feel safe. So really we were creating spaces where young people could drop in. So we have a daily drop-in time that goes beyond. We also have academic drop-in times. We really have like a daily drop-in where youth can come and talk. We've created different spaces where they can talk about their feelings. We also have a lot of activities that have to do with kindness and empathy and just how you can give back. We've used some of the, you know, what's happening in real time, learning about the virus and about your immune system. So whether that's through our civic engagement program and what kinds of policies we can work on, or through our STEM programming, how your blood cells work and your immunity. So really focused a lot on connection activities. We also have sent instruments home because we have a very serious, large program around music. And so we've been able to work with a funder to send instruments home, and we're sending microphones home so students can continue to record. We are sending arts kits home to our visual artists. So we're just trying to really be as creative as possible and work with young people around self-care, and providing opportunities for peer-to-peer collaboration is really, really important. I think it's just, no matter, you know, what we do, it's really around creating that safe space and making some things fun. So yes, we are out of school time. We do provide academic supports, but we also want to make sure that things are engaging. So every day we have a different theme. You know, it can be Thursday trivia where we put that up. So young people can really get engaged. And we're trying to make sure we connect them, you know, with supports, whether it's at Boston Public Schools, mental health, or some of our hospital partners that we work with. And, you know, the other piece I'll say too is, you know, and I can talk more about it later, but just that we also have been doing things with staff because we need to make sure our staff is okay in order to be able to support our youth. So those are kind of some of the things we've been doing.
Mm-hmm. And Alex, that what you're saying resonates with a lot of people in participants in the chat, that Javier is giving a shout out to music and youth. And folks are also saying that—
Yes, I should say that, music and youth, sorry. Music and youth is the partner that's working with us. They're pretty awesome.
Great. And Sarla was talking about that, echoing what you were saying in terms of the academic piece of it, that if we don't help young people feel emotionally okay, emotionally stable, then how are they going to be able to do any of the rest of this? So those kind of supports really critical. So Alex was talking about that there are families that you're working with where the adults are essential workers, and that's how do you provide that kind of support? Roman, I know that in your program you're doing some work exactly around that. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I share the same concerns. I was actually just scrolling through the chat myself, because it has been very difficult, not only for our, association, but for this city of Taunton. So I do want to share a couple of things that what we have been doing. One of the first things is once we had to shut down per Governor Baker's mandate, we did open up an emergency childcare, as I'm sure as other people on this call are running right now. So we had the luxury of having, 40 children come back through our doors and be able to provide care for those families. I think the biggest concern for us was really stemming around the fact that we had over 200 kids here per day. And of the 40 that signed up, only 5 actually were kids that were involved in the program before. So what the difficult part for us was trying to figure out a way to reach out to these kids with a limited staff force, with a limited resources. So what the Y has done has been pretty creative. We have opened up a pop-up pantry. So we've doing that at our branch. We've also coupled up with the school system so they can provide lunches every day at 11:30 here. We also have the luxury of having a family resource center. So we have a mental health counselor, a school liaison, and a few other people down the street that are able to reach out and offer telehealth communication to a lot of our families that need it. That has been something that's gone over extremely well, especially with some of our high-risk families that we can't see anymore. Alexandra actually mentioned something pretty well here, and I don't want to negate from the kids, but a lot of our young role models are 16 and 17 years old, and they're going through the same exact thing as these kids are, with especially the isolation. So we've also had difficulty reaching them. So we've been trying to be creative about different programs and different things that we can put together. One of my biggest pet peeves is the amount of screen time that the kids are now having. So what we're trying to figure out is, okay, we offer them 2 hours of homework a day. That's great, but most of it's on Chromebooks or it's on some sort of tablet. So how can we bring that back to packets? How can our young 16, 17-year-old staff that are now becoming teachers figure out a way to actually instruct these kids so they continue to learn and also have fun? So with those variety of different things that we've put together, some have worked, as some I think of you have gone through, some have crashed and burned epically, and some have really stuck with the city. So what we're trying to figure out at this moment, especially since we've been extended till June 29th to offer emergency care, is those families that we haven't been able to see, they haven't answered some emails, they aren't answering our calls. So we're trying to figure out how do we connect with them without them feeling like, one, we're a burden or that we're being invasive, and two, how do we get their kids to want to be a part of the programs again? So we did a little survey that we sent out to our families and we sent out to the program participants. With that information, we were able to create at-home activities for these families. So on our website and on a few different of our Facebook pages, there's a whole slew of resources from RY and all different organizations across the country that these families can do activities at home. Now, the big piece here that I do want to focus on is just the level of detail that we have focused on with these kids around emotional management. So a lot of these kids that are in our program, because their families are such, they're essential workers, they're high risk, they're going through emotions that they've never faced before. They're going to a new place they've never seen. They're seeing new staff that they don't have a connection with. And their families are basically telling them, I have to go to work and I'll see you in 8 to 10 hours. So it's been a real big challenge for us to figure out, one, how to make those connections with them, how to support those 40 families in the correct way, but also control their emotions, right? So we've been working on reflection activities. We have the luxury of having the YV USA that selected our association as a cohort for the social emotional learning. So we've had a lot of resources that we've been able to provide to these kids. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But some of the things that have come out are journal entries and these emotional, poetic things that we didn't know these kids were capable of. And because we've made those connections over the past 2 months, I'm confident that these kids are in a better position than when they started. But again, we don't know when this is ending. We don't know when this is going to stop. And we definitely don't know when their parents are going to be like us and be able to work from home, because it doesn't seem like that's a possibility. So I'll go into that later, but that's some of the things that the Y has been doing in Taunton to support these families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of things that need to get balanced at the same time here. You're spinning a lot of plates, all of you. But so you were talking about, how you support staff in being able to then support the social emotional competencies of the kids you work with. So Barb, I'm wondering, so what are some of the kind of the areas that you think about in terms of supporting staff to be able to do the work?
Well, we have been maintaining a very intentional focus on connecting with our staff and keeping them engaged, keeping them on board and available to do family outreach and activities with kids. And so we have been doing a variety of things. We've been providing weekly professional development opportunities for them, helping them go deep into the CASEL competencies where they're honing their own skills and their knowledge of what these competencies are, what they entail, and then how to not only reflect and build their own skill sets, but then translate that to how do we do this for our kids. So for the past 8 of 10 weeks, I think, our staff has been getting these wonderful professional development opportunities. And also we have connected with our staff in a variety of different ways. So one thing we're doing is every Friday, we have a family Zoom meeting with our entire staff of 100, close to 130, 150 people. And our founder, Debbie Neelan Keegan, leads us through a morning circle discussion, a reconnection, sharing of emotions, always inspiring quotes, but opportunities to share feelings and problem solve. We also equipped our staff with the resources they need to be able to connect with kids in virtual spaces and through online opportunities. And for our families, our staff, many of our staff have contributed to family resources that we've been developing. We have on our website a resource guide, family resource guide that has a list of all kinds of needs and places to go to get them fulfilled, and COVID-19 updates. We've offered activity guides and materials and supports for parents who are now teaching. And so getting away from the screen, having a chance to do some activities, hands-on activities with their kids at home. And our staff have been also engaged on our Facebook page, posting 3 or 4 times a day, consistent activities, so that kids can come on to our FKO website and Facebook page and be able to see and participate in mindfulness activities, virtual field trips, and staff-led crafts and games and activities. So trying to stay connected with our staff, recognizing their stresses and also their challenges in now working in more sedentary ways when they're really used to being more actively engaged and connecting directly with kids. And so trying to navigate that space as well.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And Alex, I see you nodding as well, but I'm wondering about, from other folks, about how you're supporting staff and the kind of needs that you're seeing for staff.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, I think that one article that I read 2 months ago was about grief and how we're all grieving. And so I think we have to remember that our youth and our staff are grieving for what's lost, and the uncertainty. So Similar to what Barb talked about, we've changed our staff meetings to weekly staff meetings, providing space to talk. We also work with Boston University, who has been leading, social workers from BU have been leading sessions with our staff because of they are on the front lines hearing directly from families. When you have a young person or a family member crying, when there's someone who's at home sick, when someone's lost their job, these are all very heavy things to carry. So we've created that space for staff to be able to talk about what they're going through. We also tried to do some fun things. So, last week we ordered lunch for everyone, had it delivered, and we had a luncheon with all of our staff. We also purchased other.
So Alex, you had lunch then delivered out like to each individual staff member?
Yes, to each individual staff, yep. Mm-hmm.
So you were able to have lunch together even though you're all apart?
Exactly. So just trying to think of ways that we can be, more connected. We have different themes also for staff every day that, we do like a cultural jam on Tuesday. So you can submit something about culture because we're a heavy culture organization, something about identity, whether it's song, poem, etc. And then we did also add a couple of new staff to kind of help offset because the load was really heavy. And also making sure that staff, had the technology that they needed, and being more flexible about working from home and the expectations that we don't expect somebody to sit in front of their screen, similar to we don't want our youth to be in front of the screen all day. We also, talk about taking breaks. On Fridays, we only do half days. So really trying to create that space. We also started doing mindfulness activities with both our youth and our staff. Some of our staff are leading some of those, also leading some yoga pieces. So just, I think, trying to make sure that we are all practicing self-care because if we don't have staff, practice self-care and take care of themselves, and they really can't support our youth and families.
So I'm wondering, Roman, I'm wondering what you folks are doing around supporting staff. That I know that these can be really challenging times for programs and staff.
Yeah, so that I'm going to be honest with you, that's been the most difficult part, is defining the right support for staff. I think the conversations with our staff members have been great. The surveys and things that we've sent out to them to assess their needs and other things have, come back very informational for us, and it's made our decision process and data-driven decisions that much easier to make. But when it comes to the emotional support, what I've realized with 16 and 17-year-olds is that they don't really fill out a survey that honestly. And sometimes they don't really want to share their emotions that they're going through. So what we've tried to do was have the connections with their coordinators who they feel very comfortable with, make personal phone calls to them and check in. What we ended up finding out was that we have about 15 to 20 school-age staff. And of those staff, about 3 or 4 of them actually needed resources, needed food. Something that we haven't really discussed with all of the unemployment benefits and all the federal benefits that have been sent to people was that if you didn't qualify for that $5,100, or if you were just hired back in January or February, you weren't able to get that unemployment, which means you're out without a check, which means now you're finding a way to get groceries and toilet paper and everything else that has been a hot commodity. So what we tried to do was put together care packages for those staff. So we were able to help those 3 to 4 staff out, but at the same time, continue to make those personal phone calls to those young leaders. Now, where I'm so happy and proud is that 8 of them actually stepped up and are now essential emergency workers. And because they did that, we're able to provide that care. So for the ones that are here, we just finished up Teacher Appreciation Week a couple weeks ago. That was one way to really thank them for everything that they have done. And they're going through a lot of personal tribulations with, is this the right thing to do? Should I be coming here and exposing my family? I love these kids, but at the same time, everyone on the news is telling me I should probably stay home. So what we've been trying to do is, one, always give them that out. If their mind changes or if they feel unsafe, please go support yourself and your family. But if they are here, we want to make sure that they feel on top of the world and that they are doing what we call God's work. So a multitude of different things that we have done, and I can't say one has been more successful than the other, but I think a helping hand and a personal phone call goes a long way. A lot of these kids love text messages or Snapchat or whatever that might be, but it really is about that personal phone call, and I think that goes sometimes forgotten about. And the other last thing that we've done is with the Family Resource Center, some of those young staff families also have personal issues and family issues. They've also been able to help them through mental health and telehealth counseling too. So we are, again, lucky and blessed that we have the capabilities at our fingertips. Where I'm sad is that I do think when this is all over, the way that we know after school and the way that we do out of school programming will not be the same. So what we're trying to do, and I know we're going to get to that later, and I saw some of the questions on, what are you guys doing around social distancing and how are you going to open up summer? That's really all dependent on how we can get staff back. And what I keep saying to people is that only thing that's going to matter at the end of this is how we treated people during it. So they're going to remember, if we didn't call them, they're going to remember if we didn't reach out, or did we ask how their family was? Because there's businesses that are doing it very well and they're engaging their staff, even though they're laid off, they found ways to keep them in tune with what's going on. So that's something the Y is trying to do. And I'm not going to sit up here and act like we figured it out. It is a challenge that we go through each day, and we're going to continue to go through it until this is over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like just the same way that you've been thinking about with the young people that you work with, and their families, about how to support basic needs, about how to support social needs, emotional needs, that you all have been thinking about that with your staff as well. That because all of us are people and all of us are in the midst of this at the same time together. But Charlene, I see you nodding on that. But has that been happening at Sportsman's as well?
Yes, one of the things that that was planned for like members, our adult members, or was a mindfulness stretching and fitness presentation every morning. And we found that we have more staff in the middle of it than the members. Like, there were more staff that came at 8 o'clock in the morning to meet with Coach Marcel and to just have a moment to be centered and to stretch and to have those, self-check moments. And that's become the place where we all meet at every morning at 8 o'clock as a staff with some of our members, but whether they're there or not, it really doesn't matter. We're there together. And it organically just grew out of, so our tennis professionals are also at the same time creating opportunities for our older members, our younger members to be able to meet and do the things that they love to do with fitness activities. But that became the place where our staff found the most support with each other, was meeting on an 8 o'clock Zoom, having deep breathing and stretching and talking about, getting prepared for the day that was ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting, Charlene, because you were talking about that sort of spontaneously, right? That you were offering this to the adult members of the club and it was open to staff. And then you saw that a large number of staff sort of gravitated to that. And I noticed that Pedro Cruz has mentioned in the chat that we learned support for staff looks different for everybody. It's important to have real conversations with staff to figure out what exactly support looks like for them during these troubling times. So that kind of being aware, really listening to staff, as you folks have done, seems really important. And as you're thinking about the kind of the impacts of this on staff, that I'm wondering, have any of you had anyone on staff who's actually been touched by the COVID-19 crisis directly? But I see Roman, I see, and Alex, do you want to comment? I know that you've had some experience.
Yeah, I actually just came out of quarantine a week ago, so I myself have experienced, and we have had people, staff members whose family members have passed away from COVID. So it is, I think the person who commented that it is different for every single staff person. That's true. We can do all of these, activities and have staff meetings, but it is true that it's very individual. So I call my staff regularly to do one-on-one check-ins because, there are, people who have family members who are in the hotspots. Again, people on our staff whose family members have passed away. And so it is different for everybody. So doing that check-in is really, really important, and making sure that, I think Roman put it best, is making sure that we treat people with empathy at this time, and understand that, everybody has a different bandwidth. And so if people need time off, we're going to give them time off. So we're trying to really be as flexible as possible during this time.
Thanks. And Alex, I know that among all the things that all of you are juggling, that in a little while, I understand there's a Boston mayor's COVID-19 task force meeting that you may need to drop off for. So if you drop off, we will certainly understand when that happens.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just want to say that, thank you for bringing that up, because I think one thing, hopefully everyone on this call, I think there's a really important piece as we work with young people, as we work with families, is really about the advocacy. So it's not really a surprise that, our low income and communities of color have been hit the hardest financially, and also in terms of the number of deaths and number of cases of COVID. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't go back to whatever normal is, because normal doesn't work. And so we all need to make sure that we're calling our legislators, that we're voting, that we're stepping up to the table and making sure that we change policies that are affecting, our communities. So that, get off the soapbox, but I just think that's really important in the work that we're doing.
Well, and Alex, wouldn't you say too, right along with what you're saying, that this COVID-19 situation has in some ways made more people more aware of problematic situations that were already happening before COVID-19? Are you seeing that?
I hope that's true. I hope that's true. I'm trying to be optimistic that people, are reading, the papers, that they're looking at the numbers, and they're seeing like our communities really taking a toll. So when I think about the Latino community specifically, as an example, Massachusetts is the #1 state for Latino income inequality. So all of this, we're already, on the fringe here, and this has just caused such devastation. So I'd like to feel optimistic that more people are having a conversation, but we have to do more than just talk about it. All of us collectively have to, again, make phone calls, get involved, with our legislators, calling our city council, our mayor, like looking at our own policies within our own organizations, and how do we strengthen, things that affect our families. So if we look at, for example, who gets contracts in the city of Boston, we need to have more, businesses of color who are getting contracts. Like right now, we have so many small businesses who were not able to access the PPP loans. So how do we make sure we set aside dollars for those small businesses as they rebuild? So I think I'm just saying it's all of our collective responsibility. And so hopefully I can have some optimism to your question. I hope that that's true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and certainly, all of you in these important out of school time programs, sounds like you are certainly seeing that as you're trying to reach out and connect and support with families. I see the concerns that folks have expressed in the chat as well about who you're able to reach and who have not yet been able to reach. And I'm wondering that, have there been any strategies that any of you have found particularly useful in being able to connect with some of the families who at first you were not able to connect? And I know you've all been trying a lot of different things. What have you found, Charlene, for example, that how have you connected with families?
We found that consistency is most important. You know, if I call and you don't answer, I'm going to call again. I might have another staff member call. We work with we have some MSW interns that we're having folks call. It's an email, it's a phone call, it's a drive-by, it's a knock on the door. It's whatever we can do to try to reach our families. And knowing that in the midst of that, if we haven't reached a family, trying to be okay with the fact that they'll be okay in that moment, just so that we don't obsess and get so like stuck in the weeds with just trying to reach one family that we neglect the rest of the families that we are reaching, but at the same time still come back around the bend and just keep trying. You know, I might not reach one, but somebody else might. If we can just get them to answer the phone or answer an email to say that they're okay, that they, you know, that they know that we're there, and being consistent is really, really what makes the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm seeing some folks in chat saying that in some cases they've gotten more connected with families than they had been before. And I see some nod from Roman on that too.
Yeah, what we've noticed here is that some of the families that were silent with us during regular hours are more in tune with what we are doing now than ever before. One mom was extremely funny with me. You know, she said, whatever I can do to get him busy and active and doing whatever I need him, so he's tired at the end of the night and goes to sleep. And so I think that what we've tried to do, and this is what everybody's been saying, no one likes all the same things. Every resource you put out, it's not going to be the same for each family. Some may work for this, some may work for that. So what we've done is like a plethora of different items and tried just to throw everything against the wall and see if it sticks. I had somebody that's reached out and went on our Facebook page and saw our scavenger hunt that we just put out. We are trying to do whatever we can to keep these families active and engaged. But to that point, you know, there's about 3 families I can think of at the top of my head. They come in, they sign, they pick up their child and they leave. There's never a conversation. There's never, hey, would you want to come to our parent cafe? Here's a newsletter. They don't read it. But for some reason, when this has all happened and they've realized the resource that we really are, and part of it is I think we make such great connections with kids. And I think the kids at home are voicing that they might miss the wire, they might miss the programs, and especially their friends. It's made them more inclined to reach out to us. So we do have a good outreach on Facebook, you know, that goes very well. But I do think the easiest way they have made that connection is that we have 2 coordinators with with work phones, work cell phones. And so I've seen a lot of personal text messages from these moms and dads just asking about different resources. And some don't like to call and ask for things. So they might feel more comfortable of sending a text or sending an email, especially a text message, I should say. So with throwing everything against the wall, some of it's worked for some families, some hasn't. Right now, what we're trying to brainstorm is that some of our communities across the South Shore have said you can do like small programming in person if it's 6 feet away. So we're trying to figure out how do we get families on to our campgrounds in a very safe social distance, activity. But how do we get them out of their house and being able to see some friends and see some other people now that the restrictions are kind of easing up. So to answer your question, Jim, I think it takes a village to get these families engaged. And I think once they are engaged, figure out what that pathway is so they stay engaged. Because it's very easy for them to fall off and then things could happen and you're not really sure. And a big concern of mine is that we're going to miss a lot of the boat for them in summer and maybe even the beginning of the school year. So if we don't see those kids for 5 to 6 months, what's going on there? And we haven't talked about this yet, Jim, and I do want to get to it later, but some of these families and some of these parents aren't inclined to know how to reach out, and they don't necessarily, not that they don't want to, they just don't think it's what's right. And I think that's where the Y and other organizations have really been able to come in and bridge that gap. And now that we've lost that gap, a big concern of mine is those kids are being left behind. And I'll give you just an example. We have a couple of children that in our emergency care, and they come every single day with dead Chromebooks. And we finally asked, why aren't you charging your Chromebooks at night? what's going on. Is that something that we can help with? And they ended up telling us that mom doesn't want to use electricity to charge those Chromebooks. What doesn't make any sense to us. So we then had a conversation with mom. Obviously, it was a big misunderstanding, but it's those little conversations that affect the kids so much. And they were so embarrassed to even tell us because every single day that was happening. So it does take, one, having that personal conversation, two, making that connection with brand new individuals that never have been here before, and three, being very genuine and intentional when you do make that ask and you do make, honestly, that, because sometimes it could be tension there. So there's a lot that you can do, and there's a lot that we continue to try with a very drastically reduced staff team at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it sounds like, you're talking about really understanding the context that families are coming from and being able to connect with them in a way that is respectful and that where folks feel like they can tell what's really going on to be able to share. And Alex, I know that you think about that with the youth and families that you work with, about how to engage with folks in a way that really honors their culture and their situation.
Sorry. Yeah, that's part of our framework. So we created a cultural curriculum that's around cultural identity, exploration. And so we infuse those activities, throughout the program. But then, our staff is reflective of our population. So we actually really try to hire the young people that we work with. So we have a program that spans like 7 to 10 years. We work with young people through post-secondary, and we hire them and support them while they're going to school. And about 40% of our staff are youth that were in our program. So we're carrying, the cultural and the linguistic piece, which is really, really important, I think, for anybody, in this work, is making sure that we understand, the culture. I saw in some of the chat boxes about, families feeling comfort asking for things in different ways, whether that's, they might not ask for it on the phone, they might ask for it via email. So I think we just have to take a step back and know that the way that we, as a society, we're very individualistic, and many of our communities come from a collective experience, especially immigrants. And so really taking a step back and making sure that just because we think something works our way, that we have to make sure, I think the importance of trying things in multiple ways is really, really important, and just meeting families where they're at. So I think is, again, just being really self-aware, not to push families. I think there was one comment that was saying, they're nervous about families being over contacted. I say that all the time. I'm nervous too, because I feel like I'm on a lot of calls with Boston Public Schools, and I know their team is calling, and then our team is calling. And so I wish there was a way we could just be more coordinated. And I think that will happen over the long term, because obviously this is first time for all of us. But we do want to really remain conscious of that, and just keep at the forefront that, again, just like every staff member is an individual case, every family is individual, making sure that we also look through a cultural and linguistic frame in the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So ideally, with folks being worried about, families maybe being overwhelmed by teachers and counselors and out of school time people reaching out to them, that ideally what we will start to work for in our communities is really get all of this contact coordinated. And I know that some of you have been working in that way, and that United Way in the Social Emotional Learning Collaborative there has been working also around sort of making the connections around throughout the year around social emotional learning in school and out of school, and having that be a more collaborative effort. And it seems like this is a kind of time where whatever a community has put in place that has been strong is getting used and used to its fullest. And whatever inequities are existing and whatever gaps are in place, that, boy, we're really seeing it now, and really feeling it now. So that certainly suggests, Alex, as you were saying, that when we get into the next phase, it can't just be going back to normal, that we've got to come back in a way that actually strengthens our work with young people. And I'm wondering when, when folks are talking about, helping young people cope in this kind of situation, that, and the importance of the connection and relationships, that Barb, I'm wondering, how would you see that? How does that connect to the kind of work around social emotional learning that all of you have been doing? That are you hearing kind of common themes in what people are saying that relates to social emotional learning?
Of course, and I think one of the keys to social emotional learning and connection with our families and our children, our youth, is relationship. And building those relationships and maintaining those relationships, which of course has taken a different turn during this COVID-19 period. With respect to reaching out to families, we have a team of social workers at FKO who make weekly calls to families, who check in with them proactively, also make numbers available where families in each district that we serve can reach out to us. We also have our site directors and our district directors checking in with families as well, a number of whom speak many languages. So we do have opportunity to reach out to families whose first language is in English, and provide resource materials as well in different languages. In terms of thinking about the out-of-school time, in-school connection that you referred to, Jim, I think right now we have this amazing opportunity to use where we've been as a springboard for a new way of being together, to collaborating now and in the future. As someone said earlier, all of our learning right now in these past few months has been all out of school time. And I think that there's this new appreciation and awareness of the role out of school time programs play in children's learning, in children's social emotional development. So we do have a lot of uncertainties about what this new transition into summer is going to look like, and it's really going to rely on strong collaboration with the schools that we partner with. For example, what will the staff-child ratios be like? Will we need more space or different spaces to carry out our activities? What will be the expectations with regard to sharing materials within a program, or even the way we go about playing games? It's going to apply, we're going to have to think about new strategies for old ways of being when we are coming together in that physical space. And I think we will rely on our principals, our school faculties to provide ideas and support for how we can be effective with our children, help them to connect with one another in safe ways, and to provide the routines and the same kind of lessons around self-awareness and around understanding and empathizing with each other and having that social awareness piece and building relationships, but in different ways where we're not really physically connecting, and we might be having to identify emotions with potentially masks on our faces. How will our communication practices change? How will we read each other's emotions? These are questions that we're getting our heads around, and I think if there was a silver lining to having an opportunity to regroup, this period of working remotely has allowed us to really intentionally plan for a summer that has blocks of the day carved out for having children express their emotions, share their feelings, practicing mindfulness and meditation exercises. And also we have are planning, as we did last year, a block of the day just dedicated to kindness and are recognizing the heart prints that we leave behind with one another, and building those kind of stories and craft connections to help reflect in those ways and to continue building on those skills. But just to get back to your point, connecting with our schools and figuring out what the new normal is going to look like really will involve, I hope, a strengthened partnership from the good places that we've been and stronger places together in the future.
So Barb, I see somebody in the chat that Jen talks about the point you made, how difficult to read emotions these days with masks on, and that just recognizing that that's a whole nother kind of layer of emotional disconnection for kids and for staff, and just balancing all these things together. That, and Barb, you were talking about that, what this might look like what's next, as we're thinking about summer programming and beyond summer programming. But, and I'm wondering that for Charlene and then Roman, how are you thinking about that? What does what's next look like? And how are you approaching it in a time when none of us know really what's next? So Charlene.
So I think for me, so for those that don't know, this would have been my first summer at Sportsman's. So what a way
welcome. Wow.
Right. I've done this work for many years, but it would have been my first summer at Sportsman's. So we've been trying to figure out how do we plan. We have two summer programs that we run at Sportsman's. One is with a connection with Boston Public Schools, where it's more academic, and then one is grounded in what we do, and that's tennis and fitness. And so trying to figure out how to do both, if both will even be possible. We know that our summer program that we do with Boston Public Schools will actually happen. It'll probably be more virtual than, a little bit more of what we're already doing, because it's going to be grounded in trying to get our students prepared for the next school year. But one of the things that makes it what it is the fact that they can get together, learn a new sport, be active, run around. And that is something that might not be possible. And so that has been difficult for us in trying to plan what will that look like, and how will we be able to reach all of our students. If it's going to be a virtual summer, how do you engage that 7-year-old who has had enough class on the computer and the sun is shining and he's really not interested in looking at a computer screen anymore, and how do they talk about how they're feeling and be able to share all of that? We've had many conversations about what it'll look like, and how we might have small opportunities for our students to get together and do what they love to do. And quite frankly, with everything being so up in the air and still waiting on so many concrete decisions, it has been hard and frustrating to be able to plan. It's been hard.
For sure. And Sarla is just mentioning in the chat about the idea of masks and emotion, being able to read emotion through masks, and saying that there are some masks that are used with the hearing impaired population that actually have a see-through area where the mouth is, so that you can see that part of the facial expression. And I think we also know too that that youth providers show their emotion and their caring for young people in their whole bodies, right? The whole social emotional learning idea that we can read emotion in different ways in different cultural contexts, through body as well as through face. But this is all new. They're all things that all of us are working on and trying to figure out together as we're heading into whatever this next stage is going to look like. So Roman, how does planning for the summer look like for you folks?
Yeah, so it's been, not gonna lie, extremely confusing and very hard. I think the hardest part is not having an answer for parents. It's, you know, we can say we're planning all these things, but in all reality, by this date, we usually have over 100 kids already registered. You know, we're usually pretty prepared by this date. So that's been the most difficult, is having those conversations with parents who are losing their patience because they need to figure out something. But it seems across the board, either camps are closing or they're finding other ways to service. So what we've been challenged to do, and what I've challenged my team here to do, is come up with about two and tentatively 3 different options, right? So the first option that we're going to have is that, first, let me give you a background of what our camp usually is, because it's not the typical camp with green space. So we call it our camp Summer Fun Club. It's a trip club. We do about 3 different field trips a week. On top of that, the other 2 days they swim in our pool, and they use our outside and all that good stuff in between. Now, everything that we thought that we could do this summer has been taken away. Kids can't go on buses. If they do, they have to be every other seat. Unfortunately, that is an expense that the Y can't take on. At the same time, the trips that we were going to go to now are denying us for the amount of kids that we were going to be bringing. So that makes us have to be a little bit more creative there. So what we've decided to do in our first option is, well, I just said to our team, I'm like, we're opening up. We're just going to figure it out. We're going to open it up. And we're going to start registering families so we can make sure that their slots and vouchers don't expire, because that's something that also hasn't been addressed yet. So as of right now, we're going to do something of a tent setup like in our parking lot, almost making it like a typical town rec camp. On the rainy days, you don't attend. On the other days, you do. There's some stuff we're still waiting on for the state, especially the Board of Health regulations. EEC and a few other things have been updating about like square footage and social distancing and those kind of measures. But the actual camp booklet that we usually go by and are licensed by is still being developed. So what we're going to do is again come with 2 different plans. The second is we're trying to find an area that can house the new 1-to-9 ratio that we have to abide by, that also has some sort of camp or some green space that the kids can go outside. We reached out to the school system. It's too much, it's overloading the Taunton schools. They're trying to figure out how they desanitize and clean and do all that stuff prior to letting us already back in. Never mind having the YMCA come in with 200 kids and run amok. So what we have done is put all of our finances, you know, into a spreadsheet to try to make us as viable and sustainable as possible. What I also am trying to do is partner with any community resource we can, because if we're not able to have the typical trip club, you know, how do we make these kids' summer still special and memorable? So that's something that we really are trying to develop at this moment. We did think by this time we would be a lot further into the planning process and that there would be a lot more decisions made regarding camp. But again, with the cases continuing to spike, with things still being uncertain, we know that even when they come out, there's potential for them to change midsummer. And if that is the case, how do you respond to the new normal? So we are going to be looking at a very, you know, drastically reduced amount of kids. We usually have 200, like I said. We may only be able to provide for 50 with a 1-to-9 ratio that also changes our staff expenses. So as we've all mentioned, you know, a lot of small businesses did not get that funding to help out payroll and benefits and all those things that we continue to take on. So it is a real sustainability challenge that we're going to be facing this summer. But I can tell you this, is that these kids and these families deserve the best program that we can provide. So we will be providing something 100%. We just need to figure out on paper what those families are going to be doing throughout the summer, each and every day.
And Barb, how are you folks thinking for Kids Only? How are you thinking about what's next?
Well, we're imagining that we may not be able to go back at 100% capacity, that we're going to be waiting to hear what the new rules and regulations are, the new requirements from the state. So we're waiting to hear about that. In the meantime, we're exploring, you know, and wondering where to go beyond school facilities. Certainly school facilities would offer us, and we usually do many of our summer programs at school facilities, having access to many classrooms. But depending on schools' availability to opening their doors, considering their issues, we are kind of exploring what other avenues would allow us to work with children in smaller groups. So rather than one giant program, maybe have several different locations with smaller group sizes. Maybe you thinking about hotel space, maybe thinking about working with churches or other types of facilities. So we're exploring different options, but optimistic about being able to reconnect and maintain our presence in schools and the communities where we've been serving folks for a long time. But we are also wondering what the length of the summer will be when we are able to go and set up shop. But we're certainly looking forward to that and figuring out how to reach out to as many of our families as possible and making those services available.
So I'm wondering that Amy mentions in the chat that it's hard to plan for the unknown. And that seems like that's the time that we're in right now. And I'm wondering, that kind of uncertainty can lead to a lot of stress and anxiety for staff and for families and for youth. And I'm wondering, what have you found, knowing that there's no magic answer here, that what have you folks found has helped most with helping young people manage this uncertain time? Yeah, go ahead, Rum.
Well, I'll start with the parents. I think being as upfront and honest with and transparent with the parents on where we stand, that's been the easiest and best way that we've been able to make that connection. Continuing to say we want to provide the best program we possibly can for your child. We want to have you guys come back in our building as soon as possible. We just are not sure on what the regulations and policies are going to be around it. I'm surprised each and every time that we say it and how understanding families are, because again, we're talking about such a microcosm and school is huge, don't get me wrong, and out of school is huge, but every single facet of their lives has been affected. So we're just another person basically telling them the same thing they keep hearing in any other avenue of their life. So as of right now, our families have been extremely understanding. I do think some of them are running out of patience, partly because they have to go back to work. And if they have to go back to work, who's going to care for their child? So that's what really has stemmed, I think, some of their frustration. And luckily, we have a really good staff team here that has great connections with them. So that's worked out. But to talk about young people, to ease their sense of anxiety, I've seen it the most with our young staff. The young kids that we have here, the 40 children, I mean, I'm telling you, they're the most happy-go-lucky kids. They are here and they are going through their emotional tribulations, but for the most part, the games and the activities we have them doing are taking their mind off of that. So we haven't actually seen, we've seen a decrease in behavior. We've seen a decrease in risky behavior that we tend to see with our regular kids that came through the building. And I think part of that, one, and this is where I think the positive comes from COVID, is smaller ratios. I never believed in a 1 to 10 ratio to begin with. I never thought that was something that was realistic. So to go down to 1 to 9 is just a little bit better, better for me. Again, that leads to a staffing challenge, but that leads to better care for children. That leads to a better emotional connection to children. So that's something that I've really liked that's come out of this. I also love the social distancing measures because there are some camps. I worked at camps now for, the 5 years before I started working in this level at the Y. And, because of those regulations, you do have some camps that have two counselors with 30 kids. And when you have that amount of kids with those counselors, some behaviors or some emotions go unchecked and are not listened to, and the kids aren't heard. So what I've seen here, and I see the direction that the state is moving in, I think there's going to be a lot of care and concern put around emotional intelligence and emotional care for these kids, especially when we open back up into whatever new normal that might be. So with decreased ratio sizes, with an intention on having resources provided for these kids. I'm talking everything from, the hand sanitizer and everything we're talking about, but also their own personal resource bags. So we've created, and I know I'm going down the rabbit hole here, but we've actually, felt like made the kids feel more secure, because each of them now have their own personal art supplies bag. They have their own personal, basically anything and everything they do at the Y, they have their own. So they're now able to call, this is my supplies. I take care of my items. I don't want my crayons breaking, unlike when you see the kids just do this just to have fun. So it's definitely been a rewarding experience to see it. Also, I'm not going to be ignorant enough to ignore that there are definitely a portion of the kids that are still in this program having a difficult time with their parent being at work. All they see on the news is that potentially their firefighter dad or their police officer that's a mom may pass away because they might be exposed to COVID. And that is a hard thing for these young children to really get up every day, be away from their parents for this amount of time, and honestly have this sort of fear that their parent might not pick them up. So that's been something that we've really segued, is that emotional intelligence and emotional maturity, and really putting a lot of things on how do you reflect on how you are feeling at this moment? How do we start journal processing? How do we get them to feel comfortable reading that in front of the crowd, or even just bringing it home and showcasing it to their parents or whoever is at their home? That has been something that's been super powerful for us as staff members here. And I shared a personal story with Kate and Jim when we first had this conversation. But we had this this young boy who wrote a pretty powerful journal piece on how he just missed his friends and how he wasn't exposed and how he felt like because he wasn't able to see his friends, he was going down this dark path, but because he was able to be put into the Y and how he was able to make new connections and new friends. And when you see a 9-year-old, or I think he was 8 or 9, when you see somebody write that, it's just jaw-dropping, and it honestly brought a tear to my eye, because those are the kind of connections and things we're trying to do for these kids. What makes me sad is that, he is one out of the 200 that unfortunately we don't see anymore. But he is someone that I think will remember what the Y and what we tried to do about supporting him when he was a kid. So there's a lot that we have tried to do. There's a lot that we continue to do. And again, I think a year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to look back at this time and say, wow, that was really successful. And that was really successful. Or, oh my God, I can't believe we tried that. But there's going to be a lot of new things intertwined in our business model, which I think will make us extremely successful for years to come. Because again, once you start these things, parents are going to have an expectation that that's going to continue. It's not going to say, oh, crisis is over, we're going back to normal, we're going back to 1-to-10 ratios, we don't really care about that stuff anymore. That's not going to fly with these parents. Just like me saying I don't have hand sanitizer at the gym that I run isn't going to fly with our members. So it's definitely going to be a thing that we have to focus and just, I think, collectively work on as a unit. So.
Mm-hmm. And Ellen mentions in the chat, says, great point, Roman, that those kind of small adult to youth ratio is really crucial to emotional care. And really, I would think just relationship building too, that more we're able to do that. So when you were talking about, the kinds of things that we all might take forward from this. And Charlene, you mentioned even right from the beginning about, experimenting with a lot of different things. Some of them work, some of them don't. That I think a lot of people are expecting that whatever the next step looks like, we're not just going to be able to open up all of our programs just the way we had them. And I think a lot of people are expecting that there will be at least some remote component going forward, maybe for a little while. And so, Charlene, I'm wondering, in terms of the kind of the remote connection with youth, that being able to sort of support that kind of social connection and emotional connection, what are some of the things you've tried that worked, and maybe what's something you tried that didn't work?
Absolutely. One of the things that I talk about with my staff all the time there are some parts of this that we have found that have been absolutely amazing for our students. We have, so as sportsmen, we have done like a lot of different activities to try to really engage our students. Some of the things that worked, one of the things that I was surprised that worked as well as it did was we have a nurse that's on staff that the students love, and she had a conversation about COVID. And it was just from like they got to ask their questions in their way. And we had some staff like, oh, it might scare some of the students, but it didn't. They were like there. They were engaged. They had questions because they're seeing or hearing the news on every day at home, and they're seeing worry on their parents' faces, and they want to know, what it is. And that was something that worked, that we were shocked that worked, because we thought it might feel too technical for some of our students, some of our younger students. Some of the things that worked are the very simple things. Our kids love on Fridays playing Pictionary on Zoom with the staff. The whiteboard feature is there. They're having fun just drawing with staff and just laughing and talking and seeing their friends, and that has been amazing. One of the other things that worked was they did a cooking class. We send a newsletter out every Monday to our families, and we make sure that the newsletter is full of kids' pictures and it's bright and colorful, so it kind of breaks through all of the school stuff and everything else that everyone is getting, and the students are starting to really look forward to getting the newsletter. We send it out to the students that we have email addresses for, and all of our families, all of our parents. And so we sent the email out with ingredients, and it was something simple, some kind of protein bar with, the nut butter of your choice and some oats. And it was just great to see them all, mixing their stuff together, tasting it together. Even though they couldn't be together, they were together. But some of the things that didn't work, we tried to do arts and craft challenge, where we sent them an arts and craft project out that had very few pieces of material to have them do it and upload their picture, and they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do it on their own and take a picture and upload it to a file so that we could all view it. They gravitated more towards getting on something together so that they could see their friends' faces and they could see the staff's faces. They could make mistakes together. They could laugh at each other and just have a good time together. So we found that things that include lots of different staff members' faces, especially staff members that they haven't seen in a while, are the most important thing. It can be anything. If it includes a staff member they haven't seen in a while, all of a sudden, they're logged on. They played Jeopardy this week with a staff member that they haven't seen since school closed. And we thought that they didn't want to play Jeopardy. They didn't really want, it wasn't about Jeopardy. They wanted to see Coach Aaron, who they hadn't seen since March. But those are the things that are working, and we try to provide something new and exciting every week, along with the standards of something academic and something. Fridays are purely fun for our students, and they've done everything from having talent shows to doing show and tell, and show and tell has been everything from the spoon that they ate dinner with to absolutely whatever. We have little babies that end up coming, siblings that come to the Zoom meetings, because it just is about being with each other and being with a family, an extended family that really cares about how you're doing and wants to see a smile on your face, and they want to put a smile on each other's faces as well. And I think one of the things that we can't neglect is sometimes we worry about the students that we don't see, but they also worry about the staff that they don't see. And they want to make sure that everyone is okay, as well as we want to make sure they're okay. So making sure that we include different staff, especially even if it's staff that wouldn't normally have anything to do with our youth population. They are used to seeing them throughout the building and throughout the day. So we have them pop in to say hello and to do check-ins so that the students can see their faces as well.
So just that kind of, that all the relationships that you build over time in out of school time, that the relationships among young people that out of school time programs help foster, and the relationships with staff and young people, that you're finding ways to sort of keep those relationships active and alive as a support during this really challenging time. So just wondering, as we're wrapping up here, that as you think about just maybe one or two sentences about one thing you would suggest to someone who's in an out of school time program right now, that about how to, that you've learned about how to keep yourself in good shape during all this. That what do you do to take good care of yourself in the midst of this whole situation?
I'll start, and the one thing is to really be honest about how you're feeling. When you are charged with making sure everybody else is okay, we don't often take the time to make sure we're okay. So I have to really have serious check-ins with myself and even with my family when I feel like I'm getting, all the indecision is getting to me, to take a break, to take a walk, to let the sun hit my face, to check in whatever way possible to make sure that I'm doing okay.
Well, that seems like a very good message for all of us, that folks out there in any kind of youth serving role are also balancing everything in their own lives at the same time that you're thinking about all these young people that you care about and staff that you care about, colleagues. So just being able to take good care of ourselves at the same time, and give ourselves a little bit of a break. Maybe over this long weekend, if there is a long weekend in our lives. So thank you so much to all of you, and to all the rich ideas that have been going on in the chat as well. So we have made a recording of this webinar. We will take that in the chat, and within the next week or so, we will post that out on the SEL4MA website, and send that out to everybody who registered. But we're also going to have another webinar a week from today, at the same time, 9 to 10:30, where we're really looking at these questions about, as we come back, how do we recover from the situation and how do we use it as an opportunity for renewal, combining out of school time and in school time. And we'll be sending out a link for that very soon. So thank you so much to Roman, Charlene, Barb, Alex, and to everybody at United Way for being such wonderful partners for this, including Kate Shea, who did a huge amount to organize this, as well as Nova Bureau from SEL4MA, who's also helped out with the tech for this event. So thank you so much for everybody. Hope you have as wonderful long weekend as is possible in this very weird time in the world. And thank you for all the good work that everyone's doing for the young people in our lives.